welcome back to the pod, guys. The question today, what is your relationship with time? For the podcast that never said it would do a sequel, part 4, Woods.
But we want to make it very clear that this is not a precedent that we're going to be setting. It's just a particularly rich and diverse and vast topic.
Yeah.
And I feel like we asked more questions than answers throughout our discussions as to how you should best use time.
Yes, and if everyone's listened, if you haven't listened to What is Your Relationship with Time Part 3, ordinarily I would tell you to go back and listen to that. But equally, given the person that we've got on today to answer those questions, parts 1, 2, and 3 mean nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Effectively. So
we should just delete those episodes, actually.
They're actually completely irrelevant. It's you and me just shooting in the dark, trying to hit a moving target over the course of 3 hours. Whereas today, we're actually going to have some definitive answers on a question that I think all of us, if you're not thinking about it, you probably should think about it, because really all you have is your time on this planet. So I think it's a good thing to think about, to say the least. And hopefully we're going to get to the bottom a little bit more of how to better spend your time to more enjoy your life. And without further ado, to bring on our guest today, who is the authority on time, the time master himself, Oliver Burkeman on Will and Woody. Oliver, welcome.
Thank you very much. This can only possibly disappoint after a
that was
introduction like that.
Built up significantly there, Oliver.
Yeah. Okay, it's all downhill from here.
Do you often refer to yourself as the time master, Oliver?
That's right.
I often explain that's who I am. I find that when I start doing that just in public, I get some seats to myself on the bus. It's great. Everyone just sort of moves away. So
I just imagine you walking around wearing 5 watches on either wrist, just the absolute time chieftain. Whenever you're ready, ask him any city, any time zone, he's across it.
That's you're pretty close enough. Yeah.
How did you get into time, Oliver? Like, what makes you passionate about the subject of time?
Well, I guess, I for years I was writing a column for the Guardian newspaper here in the UK about sort of productivity and psychology and all sorts of stuff. And gradually it got more and more sort of broad as the years went by. It was just kind of things that I was interested in. And something that I realized after quite a long period was that there was this kind of through line to a lot of it, which was therefore a through line to kind of stuff that I found interesting or struggled with, which was this question of kind of how to exert more control over my time in some way. And usually that was like, oh my God, there's too much stuff, too many emails, too many demands, too many things I want to do. How do I get into a relationship with time where I can kind of force them all in? Other times it was, there's other aspects to that topic, but I was really one of those people, the self-described kind of, productivity geeks, who was really sort of looking for years for the one system or the combination of systems that would enable me to like feel totally like I knew what I was doing and could do anything I needed to do with my time and had all the time I needed. And I guess, when you test out all these systems for years and you never find the one that gets you to this position, it's quite a useful experience to go through, because then you start thinking, hold on, maybe I've got some misapprehensions here about what I should be trying to do. Maybe it's not that I haven't found the silver bullet, but that there's something kind of wrong with the setup there, with the hunt for the silver bullet. And that, I guess, was what led to my book 4,000 Weeks, which is sort of trying to offer a different way of thinking about our relationship with time and the best way to use it and what it means to be a human with limited time and all the rest of it.
So it's 4,000 Weeks, and then the subtitle is Time Management for Mere Mortals. And I think that's kind of the point that Woody and I got to with this. So we were talking about really, like, we kept trying to talk about, how to deal with, I'm chronically late, he's chronically punctual.
Too punctual. I'm always, generally speaking, half an hour early to everything because I fear so much making someone wait for me or keeping someone waiting.
And I'm chronically late because I'm so scared that I'm not going to get everything done before I leave. And so I lie to myself about time, and I have a horrible relationship with it as a result. And so we ended up in this point, which I think we were both so happy with, that Woody said, actually, that there would be book burnings of your book, Time Management for Mere Mortals. Because
did I say that, did I?
You did.
As long as people buy them, I don't really care what they do with them, right? So.
Because you said we'd actually clocked it.
Did I say that?
You did, yeah. You did. And I made a point of bringing that up with Oliver because you'd said we'd actually clocked it. It wasn't more about how we were dealing with our time. It was more of our relationship with the things that we were doing within time. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I want to pick things up with you, Oliver, is this thing that I think we both struggle with because we both deal with it at other ends of the scale. And that is a very simple thing that we all have in some form or another, which is your to-do list. Mm-hmm. And in on my side of things, that is an obsession with getting the things on my to-do list done. And on Woody's side of things, that is minimizing first of all, putting ridiculous things on his to-do list, such as get out of bed, put your pajamas away so that he can just tick a couple of boxes.
I get a real...
Because it feels good.
Yes, Oliver. Ticking the box is great. Gets the momentum going. It's a game of momentum, I find.
But then also feeling really scared to put more things on his to-do list because he doesn't want to feel overwhelmed. So what are your thoughts on to-do lists and different approaches to how to actually get your tasks done without feeling either, overwhelmed on either end of the scale?
Yeah, I love this topic almost too much. What we're circling around and what I've really tried to focus on in the writing that I've done is this kind of fundamental set of facts about being a human, which is that the amount of time we have is limited, and that we're limited in other ways too. We're limited in how much control we can exert over how that time unfolds. We're limited in our knowledge of how much we're actually going to get, and what's going to happen in the world or in other people, what other people do to us or whatever in that time. So we're in this sort of very finite situation just by being human. But we're also uniquely, as humans, kind of capable of thinking and feeling about things that are much more than our capacities, right? So I mean, you can feel that 1,000 things really need to get done today. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of unrelated to how many things you, the flesh and blood animal, is going to actually have the opportunity to do. Mm-hmm. If you were sort of less sophisticated than a human, if you were like a dog, you would not have the capacity to think about all the things you felt you needed to do by the end of the day. So it wouldn't matter that you couldn't do them. And if you were God on the other end of the spectrum, you could be in an infinite number of places at once and do every single thing that occurred to you. But we're in this weird situation as humans. You can think of all those things, but only do a limited amount of them.
Just to separate the two of us, I think Will's more like God and I'm more like a dog, Oliver.
Okay.
It's a good separation to make, but go on.
And I think that I think that you can look at a lot of what we try to do with our time and a lot of books you can buy about how to optimize your life and a lot of the stuff we do with apps to organize ourselves and all of that, you can see it as an attempt to kind of get so productive and so good at efficiently managing time that you sort of leapfrog over that limitation, right? You just sort of say, well, I actually don't need to make sacrifices or make tough choices about what I can do or not, or deal with the uncomfortable feelings of letting someone down because I couldn't be in two places at once, or deal with the worry that if I take 3 days to reply to an email, someone will be cross with me. I don't have to do any of that because I've got my systems in place and I've got the self-discipline in place and I can do all the stuff. But if I'm right, you're never going to get to that point, right? Because the supply of things to do is infinite, or effectively for humans, infinite. So no amount of optimization gets you to, means you can get your arms around an infinite supply, because that's not what infinity is. Yeah. So again and again, when it comes to thinking about to-do lists and how to sort of navigate the day, I'm trying, in what I'm writing, but also, I'm trying to remind myself of this as well. I'm trying to come from that starting point that says like, wow, this is kind of a uncomfortable position being a human. It's like there's all these things I want to do or feel I should do or feel it'd be fun to do or that would give me financial security if I could do them. And it's just a fact that it's a tiny proportion of them that there's going to be time for today. And even if I decide that I'm going to spend 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. doing one particular one of them, I can only partly control whether I even get that time because stuff happens and family members need things and the internet goes down or whatever. And if you start from that position, there's still stuff you can do, right, to become more efficient and effective, but you start to sort of understand your to-do list in a much less sort of oppressive way, because you don't think of it as, oh my goodness, I've got to get these things out of the way before I can have peace of mind. You think of it more as like, I've used the analogy before, more like a menu, right? It's like if you go into a restaurant that has 30 items on the menu, you don't think of that list of things as something you've got to get through. You think of it as something you get to pick from. And there's something very liberating about seeing like the abstract list of all the things there are to do as a menu. Obviously, then when it comes to your day-to-day choices, you might keep a little specific to-do list and you might put 3 items on it and try really hard to make sure you get through those 3 items. Or you might keep 100 items on it and be more relaxed about the fact that, it's guiding your actions rather than something you've got to get through. But again and again, I just get back to that starting point of like, let's start from the fact that just because you feel that something matters for some reason, fun, obligation, being a good citizen, making money, that doesn't automatically follow that there must be a way to make time for it. Yeah. And it's actually really liberating to kind of accept defeat on that score. Yeah. Because then you can start making some good decisions about, it sort of frees up energy and focus to get a few good things done.
So just on that good decisions, though, making good decisions, do you have any guidance or thought on what is the good decision there? Because as you said, there's infinite things you can do in the day. So what's the right thing to do for that particular day? Because I think that's the bit where we start feeling pulled and tugged in all sorts of directions, and we go, and I know I have a bad day when I try and do a little bit of everything as well. Then it's like by doing, it's for example, if I go, I want to have good quality time with my daughter. I want to have an hour of that. But if I'm also going, I've got to get that email done. It's almost like I'm doing both poorly. In a way. Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on choosing the right thing to do, Oliver?
I do. I think the first one, which is sort of slightly to reject the question in a way, is to say that like you can get too caught up in this question, right? There's sort of a tendency, which I've felt in myself and seen in other people, to go like, okay, I know I can't have perfect control over my time by doing everything today. So I'm going to have perfect control of my time by being absolutely certain I'm doing the best thing, like the thing that's in number one position. And to some extent, I think we can make wise choices, and I'll come to that. But to some extent, I think that is something else to be sort of let go of, right? And you sort of say, look, maybe I'm going to do 3 real things with my time today, depending on how you think of what a thing is, and I'm going to just sort of trust that over the course of a week, that's going to involve enough work and enough time with my kids and enough physical fitness, but I'm not going to obsess too hard about whether I've made exactly the right choices today. I mean, if you want to get really sort of, if you really think about this is something that is known as Fredkin's paradox in the literature, I believe, but that if there's 10 things you want to do with the next hour, and you can only do one of them, and they all seem really important to you, then precisely because they all seem really important to you, it kind of doesn't matter which you choose, right? You're not going to be spending your hour on something meaningless. You're going to be spending your hour on something meaningful. And someone who's enjoys their work and is a parent and wants to stay fit, say, has got 3 things at least right there that they're going to want to make sure they give time to in aggregate in the long run. But I do think the number one skill is like just learning to be okay. See, the point is, it requires you to think like, I'm spending this hour or 2 with my daughter. not because I've managed to persuade myself that the other thing doesn't matter.
Yeah,
because it does
right.
matter.
Okay.
And there'll be an endless supply
Yeah,
of good stuff
right.
to do in that area
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
But just that I've decided I'm making the choice in this direction right now.
Yeah.
And I'll make it in the other direction later.
Yeah.
And overall things will come good.
It's
so I
your
do
relationship with consequence, isn't it? It's like because that for me is the trap. If I go like, oh, cool, I've made the decision here, I will spend a little bit of time once I've made the decision going like, there was that other thing that I was planning to do. Or even at the end of the activity, if the activity is not necessarily fulfilling, or if I don't get done what I wanted to get done in that time, then I go like, I made a bad choice there. And I've been trying to. There's actually a moment that you put on Sam Harris's app, on the Waking Up app, which I've returned to time and time again because it's funny you're talking about making decisions. There's a great bit that you mention where you say that a key skill to actually living your life is making a choice. The purgatory and the real like let's call it negative time if you want to say broadly, but like badly spent time is time stewing.
Right.
Badly spent time is in that old Christian paradox, that old Christian idea of purgatory, where you're like, do I do this? Do I do that? And you make the point that if you make more decisions, you actually live your life more. You're more present because you're taking part in it rather than sitting on the outside of it thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that's I don't think I put it exactly like that, but I really like that way of putting it. So I think that's great. I think the other point to make there is just that in some sense you're always choosing, right? You're always making a decision with what to do with your time. It's just that you can be doing it consciously or not. And if you sort of hang back in indecision and you spend 3 hours not quite doing either thing, like in some sense that was a choice. You decided to spend those 3 hours in that kind of way, which, as you say, is not the best way. So in many, I guess the through line between what the two of you were just most recently saying is the thing that matters is choosing more than what it is that you choose, and developing that sort of willingness to be like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to let those things go for now. And I'm not confident that I made the right choice, but I know that what I'm doing is important to me. So on we go. And this can be a place where, keeping a record of your time can be useful. I've got mixed feelings about that approach in general, because I think it encourages people to get really anxious about whether they're optimizing their days. But, if you keep a sort of rough tally of the number of hours in a week that you spend with your kids, number of hours in a week that you spend on important focused work projects, one good advantage of that is you can look back over time and see, over the long haul, I'm giving these things attention. So it doesn't matter if for one afternoon of one day, I could only give one of them my attention, because that'll always be the case. You can see that it's accumulating, and you can make decisions like, well, I'm spending too much time,
keeping a time book.
Right. Yeah.
I did that once. I wrote down I called it like the ideal week, right? Where I quite strictly wrote down how am I spending all of my time, right? And that the reason that was confronting for me was that if my number one priority is my daughter and time with family, like that's something for me that is the number one priority. And it was like time at work was, let's say, 50 hours, right? 50, 60 hours.
Yeah.
And then time with my daughter was like 7 hours from Monday to Friday, right? And that for me was like, whoa, that's really out of balance. But then when I was talking to Will about this in a previous podcast, you can kind of go, but work is somewhat as well supporting your family.
Absolutely.
So you can't necessarily view that as completely separate there.
Right. And also, if you were lucky for one of those 7 hours, because, you can't plan for this, but if it turned out that one of those 7 hours was just one of those magical times, then that would be worth a whole bunch of others. So, I think there are dangers here in recording your time. I think the mindset and the framework to do it in is really just that sort of, I think it's useful if you're to see that you might be misaligning your priorities in that way, but also just as reassurance, just as like, look, if I spend the afternoon doing this, it doesn't mean that I've forgotten about these other things that I care about. I'll get to them. I can only be in one place at a time. I can only do a small number of things per day, but over the course of a week or a month or a year, that can be an awful lot of time well invested.
And I think that's interesting that kind of gets to the point that, you know, this is when we were calling for the book burnings that I think we kind of clocked it as well, was that the relationship with the bit that I think that we stumbled into was that what your relationship with time really says about you is what it says about your relationship with yourself. Like people who are willing to make decisions and commit themselves to things that they want to do in any given moment, as opposed to thinking about the things that they need to do or worrying about the things that they need to do even after they've made a decision, are much happier people. And that's not their relationship with time. That's their capacity to let go of who or what they should be. And I think that is very interesting because it's interesting for me because the idea of that is so freeing. The prison for me often is I have such an overwhelming sense of what I should be doing that my to-do list, even if I wrote down a to-do list of, hey, here's my to-do list, if I actually analyzed it, I would look at it and go like, and it would take me 2 or 3 passes, in fact, to see this clearly. Like, oh no, you don't actually want to do that thing. Like you've just put that there because you feel like you need to do that thing. You feel like you need to do that thing. And this actually ties in with another thing that I really loved that you said about, I can't remember who the initial piece of advice was that you used, but it was about writing down your list of life priorities 1 through 20.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to Woody? Because I think this is a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this example for the principle behind it. I'm not particularly recommending the specific technique, although feel free. I just want to be honest that I don't particularly do the specific technique, but the principle of it sort of is very important to me. It's attributed to Warren Buffett, but a lot of things are attributed to Warren Buffett that he didn't do, right? It's just that he's seen as being a very wise and sage person. So I don't think this is actually a true story. But
and who can blame him for claiming it as well? If I'm Warren Buffett there and people have attributed to me, like, yep, that was me.
Yeah,
that was me. No worries.
100%.
Allegedly his personal pilot asked him this question, like, how should I make sense of my life? And I'm like, I was being sarcastic in the book when I mentioned this, but I was like, if my personal pilot asked me something like that, I'd be like, just, can you focus on flying the plane? I want to get to a destination alive. But so how do you decide what to spend your time on? And apocryphal Warren Buffett says, write down your top 25 priorities, goals for your life in order. Most important one at the top and down to 25. And then take the top 5 and focus on them and build your life around them. But the twist in this story is the thing you have to do with the next 20 is not what we might think, right? Well, if you get a bit of extra time, do the other ones lower down the list, but kind of avoid those like the plague, because you have correctly identified in that list of the bottom 20 out of the 25 things that you care about enough that they're really seductive ways of spending your time, but not enough to have put them in the top 5 positions. So they've got this kind of middle status. I'm not worried about whether it should be 5 and 20 and 25, or whether you can ever really sort of only live your life around 5 specific things only. I think the important principle here is we spend a lot of our time on things that are kind of in this middle place, where we actually probably should in some way have the self-discipline to maybe let go of them, but they seem kind of, somewhat useful, interesting, meaningful, fun. It's a lot easier to try to find ways to get rid of things that you hate in your life and that are just completely boring to you.
Yeah.
And if like, or they just wouldn't arise. If listening to a particular genre of music or reading a particular genre of fiction just like does nothing for you, then
you get rid of
you're
it.
not going to have any problem with it. Like it's just not going to be there.
Particularly with the amount of shit that you've got at the moment. Like, you start watching a TV show for 2 minutes these days and it's no good. You're like, there's just so much more here for me to watch.
Exactly, right. It's easy to make that kind of decision. But here's a much more difficult one. What about friends you sort of hang out with because it's sort of fun, but is slightly going through the motions these days, and you would feel bad discontinuing it. And I'm not saying immediately dump all your friends who aren't your closest three friends or anything, but it's interesting to think about, and it creates an interesting inner discomfort that might be worth paying attention to, like in terms of how those things work. So yeah, I try. I'm as much of a work in progress as anyone, but I try to sort of be aware in my life of when I'm doing things that are kind of like they meet my minimum standard for not being so annoyed by them that I can't bear to do them, but they're not really worth my time. You can sort of meet yourself halfway on this stuff. You can have little quota systems where you say like, I'm not gonna make more than one plan for that kind of social event that I don't really care about. I'm going to do like, I'll let myself do one a month or something. You can do all sorts of ways of just sort of being aware of it without turning into some sort of extraordinary radical who cuts out everybody from your life or anything like that.
That gets so arduous though. I find that gets so arduous. The whole like, I'll see friends once a month. I'll read a book like I hate living like that.
What do you mean?
Right.
What do you mean?
I just can't, like, that for me makes my life feel like I mean, that's why your book's called 4,000 Weeks. Like, there is a limited amount of time, and maybe this is my problem.
It sounds like you might be someone who's more willing to take the sort of bolder, rip the sticking plaster off, as it were, and that's great. But obviously, you do need to tolerate, like we were talking about, the consequences, right? There are consequences to cutting middling priorities out of your life. Some people end up sort of volunteering for so many different like neighborhood things that that their time would be better spent focusing on one of them, and then you got to sort of piss all those people off by saying, I'm out of here, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So,
do you have a process at all, Oliver, as to like the thing? I imagine you get lots of offers, and this is the pools for your time, right? I mean, it's amazing you said yes to spending this hour with us to talk right now, and it's just great to have you here talking about this.
We're
stuff.
the once a month mid tier. This is the
right. Why the heck am I
Don't
here?
tell us where we sit in the top 25. but like, do you have a process as to what you say yes to, and then what you will say no to?
Yeah, I do. It's constantly evolving, and it's definitely a sort of it's at the edge of my sort of growth or development or whatever, right? I'm still sort of learning, and in some ways you're always learning if things are going quite well, because I'm very lucky to have had these last two books do like pretty well compared to my expectations, and so the result is that I've issued all this advice on how to say no, and now I have more opportunities coming in as a result about that really put my ideas to the test and force me to walk the talk. But the answer is it's a combination of two things, actually. One is it is the kind of thing that I said before about sort of that you will reacted so negatively to, about sort of quota type things. So actually, it's not because doing podcasts and things is a middling priority. It is because there's I could spend a lot of my time doing that, and I want to spend more of my time on other things. So I do often have sort of ideas like, well, a certain number per a certain time frame, or traveling to speak at things, right? That's very flattering, and it can be sometimes lucrative as well, and it's very interesting to go places. But obviously you can't just say yes to that and then like never be home and never be being a parent, and would make my wife very cross as well if I was just like, bye, see you in a few months. And so, there are sort of certain number per time is it can be a useful thing. And I think you can use that in any sort of professional context or a personal one, that basic idea, if you like it. But then I do try to add an intuitive part as well. I think this is really important. I'm not quite in the camp of, Derek Sivers, who famously says like, it's like if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. Like that idea of doing only the things that you're really excited about. That I don't quite do, but I do try to ask sort of, do I have a good feeling about this? Does this have life in it for me?
Right.
Do the parts of my brain that are outside my consciousness, which, it sounds a bit woo-woo, but I do just think intuition is based on a lot more cognitive activity than I'm necessarily aware of. So it's a useful
for sure.
source of information. Like, does that make me feel or does that make me feel like, ugh? And listen, I'm not saying that I can't be swayed by like a speaking fee that could be incredibly helpful to my general business model for the next 6 months or something. But generally speaking, I think that just is a really good guideline as well. So having insulted you by suggesting that you're like some one of a number of a quota of things that I'm willing to do, I will now compliment and flatter you by saying that, I don't even know what it was about the specific email that you wrote or how you phrased it or how you described it, but I was like, oh, that sounds fun.
That actually ties into another thing that I loved that I heard you speak about the other day, which was how to get things done and not dislike myself. Is that the title?
Getting things done by not being mean to yourself, I think is the one you're probably talking about there.
That's right. Can you explain that thesis, please? Because that for me has been, I think you got a snapshot on how I generally approach to-do lists and time.
Yeah.
We actually spoke about this in the last episode on time, in that one of the things that we stumbled into was that if you have a number of things to do, so Woody got married recently, and we were talking
Congratulations.
about
thank you very much.
The days in him, in a lead up to the wedding, running around doing things, and how hard it is to actually enjoy that time, because it's just like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed by all these things I have to do.
Yeah.
What we kind of stumbled into was that was because what you're doing in those moments is a stepping stone to something else. So it's a means to an end. And by definition, anything which your brain treats as a means to an end, you're generally speaking devoid of any sense of presence, because you're just like, okay, well, I just got to get through this thing so that I can get the thing on the other side. And that means that, kind of tragically, for a lot of people, if that's what your days are like when you're waking up and going like, I have this many things to do, and each of those things is a way for me to just calm everything down, you end up in a perpetual state of being mean to yourself or disliking yourself, and like, really, I mean, this is probably maybe a bit dramatic, but like missing out on your life.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's so well put. And I think it's a real sort of dilemma, right? Because as you say, if you just go all in on your goals that matter, it's almost like you end up, by that very act, missing out on a life that matters. And then some people will say, well, therefore, you've just got to sort of be present in the moment in a way that is very sort of passive and floaty around, and I don't really do anything except go to yoga retreats every so often. And like,
we spoke about those people there, and they're frustrating on the other end. Yeah.
Right. And what I've been trying to do, and it's just personal therapy on some level, right? But the sort of guiding spirit on some level of everything I'm doing is, can I find a really serene and peaceful and non-anxious place from which to live, and still be like ambitious in a good way and do stuff and create things and ideally make money and all these kinds of, and travel around and all the things that I really enjoy to do. And so it's like, is there a way of avoiding these two extremes? And obviously in theory there is, right? In theory, the argument, the idea is simply to really enjoy the process of getting to goals that you care about, right? It's not, there's no logical problem why you can't do that. It's a psychological problem. And I think that the piece you mentioned, which is by a friend of mine called Susan Piver, who's a meditation teacher and has written a bunch of books, and I always imagine is kind of I don't think she really is, but I always imagine if I was her, I'd be kind of cross that I just endlessly mentioned this one blog post she wrote years ago, because she's written so many other great things. But this one blog post had such a impact on me, this idea of getting things done by not being mean to yourself. I think you can see this as a way to find that place that is both present and relaxed in life, and also working on goals that you care about. She talks about how it was her practice in the past to sort of make these very rigid schedules for herself, meditate for this 25-minute period upon rising, and then do this, and then do this, and then work from these hours to these hours, and sort of really wanting to be one of those people who's just like, just get down to business, just do it, like none of this fussing around. And finding that one of two things always happened. Usually what happened is that she failed to stick to the schedule and then beat herself up psychologically for that, and felt bad. And then the absolute best case scenario is that you make it all work and you think, okay, phew, like I'm a minimally acceptable human being again by meeting my schedule. And then you go to bed and you've got to do it all again the next day. It's like, there's no way to live even when it is working. And she writes in this post about exploring what happened when she asked herself this quite scary question, right? Which is like, well, what do I feel like doing? What would I like to do with the next hour of my time? And how would I like to spend today? And there are limitations here. She, like me, is in a very sort of, and you, in a very sort of largely autonomous kind of work situation. It's different if you've got a very rigidly scheduled job. If you're working as a school teacher, then there's still room to ask this question, but it's within a context of timetables and things. So, things are different for different people. But letting that question back into your life in some way. The worry, and she writes very well about this, the fear is that you just like sit on the couch and eat potato chips, right? You do nothing because obviously you're just a kind of loser who has to watch yourself like a hawk all day long to make sure that you live constructively. But this is like, as soon as you put it in those terms, you realize this is a pretty unrealistically mean attitude to take to yourself. And that what she found was that she ended up doing most of the things that she'd used to sort of shout at herself to do, right? It's like, oh, actually, I kind of do want to meditate for a while. I kind of do want to keep my business in working order. I do want to catch up with friends and keep my commitments to meet up with people and things like that. So actually, this was a kind of big realization for her and for me, that you don't. It's probably not true, and you won't know until you try it, that if you let in that question of enjoyment and like what's got life for you more into your life, like apart from anything else, you get to harness that energy then, right, to get stuff done instead of constantly squashing down what you want to do in favor of what you think you should do. You get to use that fuel source of desire basically to do things. And then just finally on this point, I know I've gone on a long time, but like it's also worth realizing like there might be people who are in danger of just sitting on the couch all day long eating potato chips if they didn't do, but they're not any of the kind of people who are ever interested in this stuff, right? If you're already asking a question about a to-do list, or listening to a podcast about your relationship with time, like you don't need to worry that you don't care about how you use your time. You just need to find a more humane way of actually living the time that you have in ways that matter to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think that like I think I mentioned this to Woody. I remember it went through a series of depressive episodes probably 6 or 7 years ago, Oliver, and I was really depressed at one stage, and I remember like and this is just how like tightly wired I was at that stage. Like I was so scared of it going the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was so scared of being in that situation where I was like, what if I do end up on the couch and, eating potato chips? Like I was so terrified that I was going to like amount to nothing and not be able to pull myself out of that this drill sergeant in my head was like, I relied on it, and like letting go of that, I felt like the sky was going to fall in.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, if I don't listen to the drill sergeant and I don't do the things, everything's going to go horribly wrong. And just on that point about like not being one of those people, or just paying attention to this anyway, my therapist ran me through this this exercise basically that they use occasionally in clinical therapy, where they ask you, it's called like the worst case. I think it's called like the worst case scenario test, where they ask you what you're worried about. They do it often with people with anxiety. They ask you what you're worried about, and they go, "What's the worst case scenario?" And I'll be like, "Oh, well, I wouldn't go to work that day." And she go, "Okay, what's the worst case scenario?" Well, I might lose my job. Okay, what's the worst case scenario? Well, I'll probably end up in my bed. Okay, what's the worst case scenario? Probably like be there for a few days. Okay, and then what's the worst case scenario? And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And she was like, "Okay, well then what do you think you'd do?" And I was like, "Well, I'd probably get up and go and find something to do." And she was like,
Right.
"Yeah,
Right.
you would."
Yeah.
I think you did this with me, and I ended up in an apartment by myself, and my wife had left me, and I had a bad relationship with my daughter. Do you remember that? Where I just really spiraled, and it was like, I don't think I did the exercise how I was supposed to.
Well, except that, like, I mean, this is a different blend of. There's a whole. I'm thinking of lots of different authors who in this sort of space, and it's a Stoic idea as well, right? But like, the scenario Woody, that you just described there, like, nobody would say that is anything but really bad. But there's a really important distinction between really, really, really bad and like life-endingly catastrophic, and there's a very important space there to be like, okay, that's the worst case, and I would have the agency to take a next step if I found myself in that situation.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the distinction you said there? So it's like, that is really, really, really bad versus...
I sort of associate this with Albert Ellis. I don't know if you've ever read any of his like funny old psychology books. They're all called things like, there's one called How to Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About... How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. Yes, anything. And it's got all these like crazy titles. And he was like a sort of funny character. But yeah, I was talking about the distinction between something being really, really, really bad and something being sort of absolutely terrible, kind of catastrophically, life-endingly disastrous.
Yeah.
In fact, nothing ends your life except
Ending
the
your
thing
life.
that ends your life. So, and I think it's really... and again, both examples you gave, right? There are these the serious one and the less serious one. It's like, it's something like we don't trust ourselves to have the inner resources to like make a next step, even though we do that every day of our lives.
Yeah, that's so funny. Like, it's like that void is so scary that you pedal so hard to stay away from it. But by pedaling so hard to stay away from it, you should be proving to yourself that even if the void did arrive, you would still be pedaling.
You'd have the pedaling ability.
It's the same guy pedaling right now that would be pedaling if the sky did fall in. But we get so worried about that we put all these things in place to just try and keep the gears moving that we lose sight of what's enjoyable to us.
And I think something that is useful here, I don't know, tell me if it isn't, but something that I've always found useful, you will run into a lot of advice in the world of therapy and psychology that I've found a bit difficult to deal with, that is all about, showing more and more and more compassion to yourself. And I think it's true, but there's a sort of, I've always had some sort of resistance to it. That probably is a whole therapy session in itself, why I would do so. But there's this idea that I've written about a couple of times here and there, that of the reverse golden rule, which comes from a philosopher called Ido Landau. And it's just this idea, not of treating yourself with wonderful love and compassion and going down that route that is difficult for some of us, but just not treating yourself any worse than you would treat one of your friends, right? And realizing that a lot of us kind of do internally in the internal monologue, treat ourselves in ways you just never dream of behaving in that way to someone else, someone you knew, or, someone at the checkout in a supermarket, right? You're just like, of course you wouldn't, because you're not a huge asshole. And it's like, and so just that notion of like, what would a good friend of mine suggest here? And a lot of the time that is going to be going easier on yourself, resting, doing what you feel like doing, things like that. But also some of the time it might be sort of tough love. It might be a good friend of yours might say, actually, you do need to like get up and make the bed and put one foot in front of the other and do these things. So it's not a hard taskmaster, but it's a sort of firm but loving kind of voice. And I just found that really helpful, because it wasn't asking me to treat myself as super special compared to everyone else. It was just asking me to be egalitarian about this. And if I wouldn't yell and scream at members of the public, which I generally don't.
I love that you said that, because that's something that I've heard Sam Harris talk about as well, which is like, you often he says to people, they're like, oh, practice self-compassion. And for people that just aren't used to that, like self-compassion is so foreign to them that they don't even know where to start.
Right.
It's like, oh, you want me to like be loving towards myself. It's like, I don't know how to do that. Like I've never really done that with myself. But if I can soften that to just like not being such an asshole, then it would be a little bit easier.
Right. And also you can compare it to something you already do, which is like, maybe you don't think that you go through the world exuding perfect, unfiltered love, but you probably are okay at being friendly towards people in general. That's all you need.
We're actually both assholes, Oliver. I can't believe you haven't picked that up yet. You're the first person to say we're nice guys. Rare.
Mate, I'm very conscious of your time. We've tried to answer what your relationship with time is, really, as best we can.
I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the answer there is that there isn't an answer, which is kind of already quite...
Feels like a cop-out. We've got the time master on. I'm not letting him off the hook that easily. There's no way.
Okay, here, can I offer a thought anyway then that is maybe it's slightly sort of pulling the rug out from the whole conversation, but I think it's useful, has been useful for me. We've been talking about different relationships to have with time, and that obviously is the important question day to day. But one of the things I've written about is this idea that there's something a bit strange baked into the very idea of a relationship with time, and I think it is the clue to some of the problems that we experience, right? Because baked into that notion is like there's you and then there's your time, and you have a relationship with it. And the sort of productivity bros on YouTube want you to be dominant in that relationship and like own your time. And then a lot of us go through our days feeling like the relationship is that time is like chasing us down an alleyway, right? That we're sort of hounded by time. And then some people seem to suggest that there might be some like very peaceful way to coexist with time. And it can be useful for some people to really sort of question this notion that this is what's going on. As I've said this before in different places, but like if you were a medieval peasant in northern England, where I'm talking from now, you're in the sort of, in the Middle Ages, your life would have been absolutely awful in lots of ways. And I need to not suggest that I'm suggesting we go back to the mindset of medieval peasants. Life was short and hard and horrible. But in those times before industrialization, before clocks, before sort of public ideas of objective time, I don't think you would have gone day to day thinking about your time as something you had a relationship with. You would have just lived your life. You would have milked the cows when it was milking time. You would have gone to bed when the sun set. Time was just like what you were in a way, as opposed to what you had and then had to get right in your relationship with. And so I think part of the reason we're always struggling to how should I use my time the right way? And am I using it right or wrong? Is that right down at the bottom of all of this, that's not what time is. Time is just we're here for a stretch and we pass through this span of consciousness and then it's over. And we definitely have some ability to choose certain actions in the moment, and some of those actions can absolutely be the kind that add up to long-term results that are very pleasing to see in the world when they work. But you almost want to sort of see all of that as a bunch of concepts that you're able to use sometimes as a tool. And the deepest truth behind it all is you're just here in this, and there isn't really a question of a relationship with time. It's just you alive in the world. Maybe that is too much of a sort of stoner thought on which to
no
I
don't know, but it felt worth saying.
I like it.
No,
do you read any
awesome.
Winnie the Pooh, Oliver?
I have read Winnie the Pooh.
I feel like the way Winnie the Pooh deals with time is just that for me is the goal. He doesn't think about it at all. He's just looking for honey.
I do agree that you get a sense of that timelessness that really sort of I mean, I have read the Winnie the Pooh books to my son recently enough that I can remember some of this, and I think you're not wrong. There is a sense of timelessness that is very well conveyed in those books. Yeah. And there's a moment in one of them where it's time for Christopher Robin to grow up and go to school and put away his soft toys, and there you can feel the sort of encroachment of modern industrialized time onto this kind of world of enchantment. But the world of enchantment is always there, even while we have our to-do lists to deal with.
That's right, mate. Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation.
What should we be reading of yours right now, and is there anything we should be looking out for?
Thank you for asking. My most recent book is called Meditations for Mortals, and it's sort of a 4-week kind of course or something, a retreat through a series of brief chapters in this sort of becoming more comfortable with this kind of approach to the finite life and focusing on the right things and actually getting around to the right things. So that's, wherever you buy your books.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
And he can say that because they're all over the world. You couldn't burn them all if you tried, Woods. He is...
That is my number one priority, though. Forget the other 20. I'm coming for all your books.
Listen, you'll need to make some bulk purchases for that, and that is fine by me.
Eradicate Burkeman. It's going to be costly. Oliver, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
For me too. Thank you.